to get in your word and teach such an important topic. And I pray that you would help these kids be able to understand what I'm sharing with them and that they be encouraged. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm glad that so many of you guys are here tonight because this session is kind of like the foundation of every other single session that you'll be sitting in. Answering this question is the most important thing that we could do to start off. And the question is, does God exist? Now, a lot of us would probably be like, yeah, he exists. And we're like, okay, we're good. But no, not me. I'm for an hour going to share with you why I know he exists. Because sometimes we can be like, man, is God really real? And so I want you to know that God is really real. So we're going to have 3 parts to our journey through Truth Quest. So there's 3 elements to it. The first part is reasons for belief. So reasons why you should believe. And then part 2 is going to be reasons for truth. Why is truth true? Or is there truth? And then the last one for the high schoolers is going to be reasons for ethics or reasons for what is right and wrong. So that will be the 3rd one. All right. So tonight, my goal for you guys when it comes to showing that God exists is not to prove Christianity, but rather show that it's the most probable explanation for reality. Most probable. Can someone tell me what most probable means?
Most likely.
Most likely. That's pretty good. Any other answers? Any thoughts on that? Okay, let's look at the difference of these definitions here. What do I mean when I say the most possible or possible? Okay, certain's a good idea. It's close. Now, if possible just has to do with can it possibly be done? Is there any way for that to happen? Now, anything's really possible, isn't it, right? There could be pink elephants, technically, right? It's possible to create a pink elephant. It's possible for men to be suspended in air with the right kind of vehicle or plane or helicopter, right? Now, so the word is it possible according to the universe and the world? So most things are possible. Is it plausible? Now, plausible is the idea that I'm going to have dinner tonight is a possible statement. Or I'm going to have liver for dinner tonight is a possible statement, but it's not plausible because I don't like liver. Does that make sense? So it's a possible that I could eat liver, but I'm not going to based on my taste, okay? Now, probable is meaning the most likely explanation. So I'm going to give you the most likely, the best answer, but not 100% proof. You can't 100% prove God, but we can get pretty close to the fact that he exists. So, for example, all right, someone want to come help me? Anyone with volunteers? All right, David, come up here. All right, so can you grab those Legos up there? Both towers of Legos, and make sure you don't knock them down. All right.
They're Mega Blocks. But...
Okay, yeah, Mega Blocks. All right, so come over here, stand right there. Now, I have a question for you. Actually, I have a question for everybody. Which one do you think is most likely to be created by someone of intelligence of the 2 building? The one on the left. His right. Now, why would you say that?
I'm not very smart.
It has a sequence, right? Now, does this look like it could be possibly made by like maybe my son or daughter or something? The one on the left, right? This has some kind of order to it, right? Now, if you walked into the room, right, and there was just Legos in the room, how many of you guys would assume that the Legos, just by wind and water or some other natural force, those were all put together? Anyone would believe that? No? Okay, good. We have some good thinkers in here. All right, now, none of us, we might believe maybe that, but to have a sequence of color is amazing, right? Now, the difference between chance and things just happening and order is the difference of what David's holding and just this, right? It's just Legos on the ground. Now, if you walk in and you see Legos on the ground, your first thought is, wow, some Legos fell on the ground, right? But if you see this, you see some kind of order. All right, David, you can set it down right here. The point here is this, is that you couldn't be 100% certain who put those Legos together, right? You can't be certain how old they are, what color hair they have. All you can be certain is someone did that, okay? Now, the Legos on the ground, you could be like, well, they were up here, they fell down, things like that. But here shows some kind of intelligence. This is the same thing when it comes to God. We can show that there was some kind of intelligence, that there is some kind of creator when we look at just the world itself. Now, Christianity doesn't profess to convince the perverse and the headstrong, but to bring irresistible evidence to the daring and profane, to vanquish the proud scorner and afford evidence from which the careless and perverse cannot possibly escape. This might go to destroy man's responsibility. All that Christianity professes is to propose such evidence as may satisfy the meek, the tractable, the candid, and the serious inquirer. You're like, wow, I'm on break, and I don't know what that meant. But this is what to put it in simple terms. So when it comes to Christianity, the evidence that I'm going to give you over 12 Bible studies will convince the people who are truly seeking. But people who don't want to know God, this evidence would never convince them. Why? Because they have a desire in their heart to believe something else. They're not following evidence. They're following their desires. Christians don't claim that their faith give them omniscience or absolute knowledge of reality. Only God has that. But they believe that the Christian account of things, the creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, makes the most sense in the world. So based off the evidence, this is what makes the most sense. So what evidence do we have for the existence of God? Now, maybe some of you guys are thinking, well, my teacher told me that science has disproved the existence of God. You know, they've done scientific experiments. We found that he doesn't exist. Or maybe some of you guys are thinking, I just can't believe in God because he can't be tested by science. Now, the definition of science greatly determines if science can prove God. I believe science proves God, but it depends on what you mean by science. All right, I need another helper. Somebody to help me. David already helped. All right, James, come up here. All right. Okay, grab that little box right there, the cool-looking one, and that apple for me. All right. Okay, so what we have is a box and an apple. Okay, I'll hold that. I'll hold the box. All right, so do you guys know what the universe is, right? The universe is all that exists, okay? So imagine that this is the universe, all right? This is the universe, and then what James happens to hold in his hand is an apple, okay? Let's imagine this is an apple. Just kidding. Let's imagine this is God, okay? This represents God. Okay, so when it comes to science, most people, we all reside where? We reside inside the box, right? Inside the universe, okay? And we're looking on the inside of the box, and we believe that things can only be explained within the box, and that anything outside the box doesn't exist, right? So we believe, those who believe in science only, they believe that there can't be anything outside it. You can sit down. Thank you for picking that up for me. I'm really lazy tonight, apparently. So they believe there couldn't be anything outside of it, an outside force that created all of this. That is, that science is assumed to be not only rational, causal, and unified, but also naturalistic, banning by very definition even the possibility of a supernatural first cause of the rationality, causality, and unity of the universe, which with science deals. So put it basically, for non-believers, for atheists, they go, it's just not possible for there to be a God. So when evidence points to the fact that there's a God, they go, no, I can't believe that. And they say it themselves. Francis Crick, who discovered DNA with his partner, it says, the God hypothesis is rather discredited. Indeed, he says his distaste for religion was one of the prime motives in the work that led to the sensational 1953 discovery. Now I'm going to just demonstrate for you guys how taking God out of the equation is not only unscientific, but also false. Scientists not believing that there is a God or the possibility of a God or a possibility of supernatural things is unscientific by nature. Consider this. The first scientists that discovered things like dynamics, astronomy, chemistry, the fathers of these sciences were all Christians. Isaac Newton was a Christian, Johannes Kepler, Robert Boyle, Lord Kelvin, and so goes the list. They were all Christians. One thing that you'll discover is if you look at the history of science, science was birthed in Christian environments. You don't see a lot of scientific discoveries coming from atheistic or Islamic or Eastern cultures. It was first birthed in Christian cultures. Why? Because we believe that God designed the world in such a way that he could be discovered. So it's closed-minded to believe in the material, only in the material, and it's also unscientific. Now, we all have our approach to science, and we all have our bias, but for those who are atheists, they have a greater bias. Now, why is that? Well, Greg Koukl says this: the current bias of science arbitrarily eliminates certain answers before the game gets started. Many scientists and historians must come up with conclusions that leave the supernatural out of the picture because their philosophy demands it. A theist is not so encumbered. She believes in the laws of nature, but is also open to the possibility of supernatural intervention. Both are consistent with her worldview. She can judge the evidence on its own merits, unhindered by a philosophy that automatically eliminates supernatural options before the evidence receives a hearing. Ironically, Christianity broadens her categories, making her more open-minded, not less. She has a greater chance of discovering the truth because now she can follow the evidence where it leads. Okay, it's like this. Say you're starting off on a path. And you're going down this path, and the path says, go this direction towards God. And then for the atheist to be like, no, we can't do that, because he doesn't exist. So they just like, whoop, cut off that path. And then they go down naturalism, down the worldview of atheism only. Do you see how that is a closed-minded worldview? It's more closed-minded to be an atheist than it is to be a Christian. You're like, are you sure about that? I'm pretty sure that I heard that Christians are closed-minded. No. See, Christians can say, oh, those blocks were put together by somebody this afternoon, right? And Christians can also say that the whole world was created by God, okay? For the atheists, they can say, someone put those blocks together this afternoon. The whole world came together by chance. You see how that goes? They only have natural explanations. We have both supernatural and natural explanations, which makes the Christian more open-minded. As Charlie Campbell said, for me, it's more reasonable to believe, based on the laws of logic as well as the observable scientific evidence, that God exists, rather than to believe what the atheist believes, that nothing times nobody equals everything we see in the universe. Think about that. Nothing times nobody equals everything we see in the universe. What is 0 times 0?
0.
Yeah, right? Okay. 0 times 0 is 0. And that's kind of what the naturalistic worldview is that everything in the world came by nothing, which is impossible, right? So what evidence do we have that God exists? Romans 1:20 says, for since the creation of the world, that word in Greek is cosmos, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they, which is the people who reject God, are without excuse. Yes, they know God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like, As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they became utter fools. And instead of worshiping the glorious, ever-living God, they worshipped idols to look like mere people and birds and animals and reptiles. So, the Bible tells us that creation, dolphins and giraffes and air and atoms and apples and wonderful things all point to the fact that there's a God. You're like, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. Well, let me show you how this works. We're going to look at 4 major areas of study. I can see it on your faces. You're like, man, I am on spring break. What did I get myself into? You're going to like it, all right? So the first one is cosmology. You can go back to your science teacher and be like, look at what I learned on break, all right? Cosmology. All right, can anybody tell me what cosmology is the study of? Cosmology. Hey, very good. What is the cosmos? Anybody know? Space, right? The universe. Okay, so cosmology is the study of the universe. So the first evidence we have is the first supernatural first cause, okay? The first. All right? Physics. What is physics?
Life itself.
Okay. That's kind of a different study, but physics, study of physics. Anyone take physics yet in high school? No one? Okay. All right. Physics is the study of laws, okay, that govern the universe. Astrobiology. What is the study of astrobiology? Anybody know that one?
Study of where Earth is positioned in the universe.
Very good. It's the study of life on planets. So people who believe in aliens, right? That's astrobiology. And what is the ability for for human beings or for life to exist on a planet is a better way of saying it. Okay, and then biological information is the other evidence we're going to look at. So here's the 4 things we're going to look at. So what evidence do we have for God? This is my favorite one. Now, it's super important that you just pay attention as much as you can. Now, I've been teaching this for 9 years, and I'm just starting to really grasp it. So I understand in 10 minutes, if you don't get it, that's okay. It's okay. But do all you can, because what I'm going to teach right now will be really important to tomorrow night's Bible study. All right. Cosmogony, okay? That's a fun word to say. Cosmogony. It's really close to the term cosmology. Cosmogony is the study about the origin of the universe. Cosmology is the study of the universe in all aspects. So we're going to be looking at cosmogony. How did the universe come to exist? So as James already answered, what is the cosmos? The cosmos, in the simplest terms, is space, mass, and time. Universe and all its arrays of complex systems. God created the heavens, space, the earth, matter, in the beginning, time. Okay? So we have space, matter, and time. Those are the 3 elements of the entire universe. Okay? So, we're going to watch a little video to help you guys figure this all out. Hopefully. Play.
How did the universe begin? What is its source? Few questions have generated as much controversy through the centuries or inspired as many impassioned opinions. I interviewed William Lane Craig, a philosopher who has devoted much of his career to the study of cosmology and the question of origins.
From ancient Greek materialism at the time of Plato and Aristotle up through 19th century idealism, the prevailing view was that the universe is eternal, that the universe never began to exist, that the universe as a whole is, as it were, a static, timeless entity.
This belief in an eternal, unchanging universe, for centuries a pillar of Western cosmology, was unexpectedly challenged in 1915 by Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. Einstein's equations implied a startling possibility. The cosmos was not static. but instead existed in a continual state of either contraction or expansion.
Einstein did not like the idea that the universe was dynamic at all. In fact, like almost all scientists at the time in the early 20th century, he assumed the universe was static and eternal. What's interesting and ironic is that he thought he had made some kind of mistake in his equations for the general theory of relativity. But a few years after he developed the theory, a Belgian astronomer named Lemaitre developed a model based upon his equations, which again predicted that the universe is in a continual state of expansion.
In 1929, theoretical predictions were confirmed with empirical data. At the Mount Wilson Observatory overlooking Los Angeles, astronomer Edwin Hubble studied light from distant galaxies. Hubble determined that galaxies beyond our Milky Way were moving away from us at a speed proportional to their distance from the Earth. The more distant the galaxy, the faster it is receding. Hubble's landmark discovery led most astronomers and physicists, including Albert Einstein, to a similar conclusion. If the universe is continually expanding, then at earlier points in its history, it must have been smaller and denser.
I think a good way to visualize this is to imagine that the history of the universe has somehow been photographed and made into a movie that we could play on a projector. As the projector runs forward, we watch the universe as it continually expands. But if the projector were to be stopped and were switched into reverse to make the movie run backward, then instead of watching the galaxies move farther and farther apart from each other, we'd see them draw closer and closer together.
As you trace this expansion back in time, the universe grows denser and denser and denser until finally the entire known universe is contracted down to a state of infinite density, which marked the beginning of the universe. At this point, which cosmologists call the singularity, all matter and energy, physical space and time themselves came into being. This literally represents the origin of the universe from nothing. So the startling implication of Hubble's discovery was the temporal finitude of the universe, that the universe had an absolute beginning at some point in the finite past.
Okay, so did everyone track with that? Raise your hand if you could explain to me what... Oh, good job, Eddie. I'm proud of you, man. All right, so this is what it's saying. This is really important. The universe had a what?
Beginning.
A beginning. Why is that important? Does anybody know?
Something created it.
Yeah, that's really good. But because science as a whole, up to the point of Einstein and Hubble, believed that the universe was what? Anybody know? Infinite, eternal, okay? It always existed. So there's only two options. Once the universe has a beginning point, it either was created by something or created by nothing, all right? And what we're going to show right now is that it's ridiculous to think that the whole universe was created by nothing. It makes a lot more sense for something to create it, okay? So, what evidence do we have that God exists? The universe is evidence that God exists. Something exists, okay? Something exists. We know that much, right? How many of you guys want to argue with my first premise of my argument, okay? That something exists. Oh, David, okay, do you believe that nothing exists? We're just in, like, the Matrix or something? I know, you just wanted to argue. All right, so we all believe that something exists, right? If you go to college, one day you'll be in, if you ever take philosophy, don't, unless you have to, and you're sitting in your philosophy class, you'll have a professor say, hey, you don't even know you exist. How do you know that you exist? At that point you say, teacher, I'm going to dismiss myself from your class. You're crazy. I'm walking out. See if I exist at that point, right? Okay? I'm going to take my existence and I'm going to leave, right? Okay, so everyone in the world basically believes, besides philosophy professors, that we exist, okay? We know that we exist. That's the first thing, okay? The second premise is nothing does not produce something, okay? Right? Nothing does not produce something. Anybody who would say that nothing exists would have to exist in order to say that nothing exists. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, so it's a self-defeating statement, and I want you to think about nothing right now. Okay, it's really hard, right? All you see is black, right? But then you're thinking about like a black curtain or a black just world. That you're thinking about space, basically, right? It's something, right? In the Latin, it's really interesting. Nothing. It's two words. No thing. It literally means nothing. Okay, no thing. Okay, it's nothing. It doesn't have any essence of itself. So nothing was like, and everything came into existence. All right. No, that doesn't make sense. All right. So what does that mean? Something must have always existed, right? Something must have always existed. You either had nothing and then everything that we know today, or you had something before and then everything we know today. Okay? You guys are like, whoa, mind is blown. All right? Yeah, these are called existential questions. All right? So something must have existed. Now there's two options. The option is that the universe has always existed is one of the options. Now, we just showed in the video that the universe hasn't always existed. There's a lot of evidence in science that proves that the universe hasn't always existed. The first one is the motion of the galaxies, and that the fact that we have the expansion of the universe, right? And Hubble discovered this red hue shift. And what it shows is that the stars are expanding, okay? And they're expanding at a consistent rate. And that if you were to rewind all those stars, it would come down to an infinite point of density, down to an infinite point of singularity is what scientists called it, which means where all things started and where all creation stemmed from, okay? So you have that reality that that the universe is finite, meaning that it began at some point. Okay, so that's the first evidence that the universe is not eternal. The second evidence is the second law of thermodynamics. Is one of the best and most established laws in all of science. In fact, there's no record experiment in history of science that contradicts it. It states that the amount of usable energy in any closed system, which is the universe, is decreasing. In other words, the usable energy in the universe is dying out like batteries in a flashlight, okay? For example, say you're walking through the woods and you stumble upon a flashlight, and you're curious, how long has this flashlight been turned on? So you do a little investigation, and through your investigation, you discover that the batteries are draining, okay? And you can tell how much time before the batteries drain completely. And by doing that, you can tell how much energy was in the batteries originally. So, how long do you think the flashlights have been burning? Now, what if he was to tell you, well, it's always been on. It's been like this and it's been burning forever. What if a scientist were to tell you that? Oh, that flashlight you found? Oh, it's just always been on. You'd be like, no, the batteries are dying out in it. Its light is fading, which means that at one point it was turned on. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, you guys tracking with that? So, batteries have a finite amount of energy, and so does the universe, okay? It's like this. I had bought you guys a bunch of these for the ones that came to the session, so I'll remember your faces. They haven't come yet, but it wasn't a cute little chicken. It was actually a globe, or the earth, the thing that you're on. Okay? Do you guys know what these are? Wind-up toys? They're the best. No. Okay. When you're 2, really, like, they're the best thing in the world. My son's probably looking for it right now. Okay, so when you put it down, yeah, he's adorable. And you know, I wound him up, but at some point, he's gonna finally his energy is finally gonna die out. So we'll just wait for that. Okay, maybe not. Yeah. There's a lot of energy still left. Oh, he's starting to die. That He's dead. All right, so here we have in the universe the same thing. It's been wound up by God, so to speak, and things are draining, okay? Earth's gravity shield it's draining. The salt in the ocean is getting higher. I'm not going to say global warming, but things like that, okay? Because global warming is probably a season, like a cycle. But anyway, is we have here the Earth slowly winding down, the universe winding down. So that shows what? What does that show to us, guys? What does that show to us if energy is winding down? Hey, you're a leader. Shh, hold on. Okay. What is it? It had to have a starting point. So if things are winding down, it had to have a beginning. Okay. So this brings us to our fifth point, right? You guys, this is like so powerful. This is like the major thing why I believe there's a God. Something exists. We all agreed on that. Nothing doesn't produce something. We pretty much all agreed on that, right? And then we realized the universe hasn't always existed, which means something even awesomer. And that is that something, an eternal power behind the universe, caused the universe to come into existence. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds like a God, right, of some sort. A power outside of the universe created or caused all the universe to come into existence. It's awesome. All right. So, see? Henry Morris said this, and if you guys are interested, his book's up here that I could let you borrow. The most basic scientific principle and the criterion that governs all human experience is the law of causality. This law states that although one cause may have many effects, no effect can be either qualitatively greater than or qualitatively greater superior to its cause. An effect can never be greater and in fact will always be less than its cause. Thus, a chain of effects and their causes must eventually trace to an essentially infinite first cause. So we know this, that nothing happens in isolation. So when we trace back anything, it comes to a cause. Most of you guys got here by a car, okay? The cause is what caused you to get here, and now the effect is that you're sitting here right now, okay? So there's always a cause and a effect. Now, the effect can never be greater than the cause. Okay, let me show you this and demonstrate this. All right, I have a racquetball here, okay? Anybody play racquetball before? It looks very exhausting. I'll never play that game before.
People?
Yeah. So the cause is I dropped the ball, okay? Notice something. The ball did not come back greater to my hand, okay? I dropped it from this height. It comes half the distance back up to my hand, right? The effect, which is the ball returning back to me, is less than the cause, gravity pulling the ball to the ground. Even if I were to throw this, right, and it would go higher than my hand at this point, the force of me throwing it is faster than when the ball goes the other direction. It loses energy, okay? So an effect can never be greater than its cause. And everything that is an effect has a cause. Does that make sense? So the universe is the effect, and its cause is, well, let's find out. It's probably God. Now, the way we could find out, we're not looking at the Bible yet. We're not looking at anything else. If we want to know what this first cause was that created all the universe, all we have to do is look at the effects to know what the cause is like. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, if we have infinite space in the universe, that means that the cause has to be qualitatively and quantitatively greater. So what does that mean? That the cause has to be limitless, okay? Limitless. The cause of endless time must be eternal. The cause of boundless energy must be eternal. The cause of infinite complexity must be omniscient, meaning knowing all things. To have this much complicated information you need a very wise cause. It has to be intelligent. The first cause of love must be all loving. Okay? If love exists, the one that caused love to come into existence must be loving. The cause of life must be living. So what do we know about the cause? It's not some impersonal force. It is infinite, it's eternal, it's wise, it has knowledge, it's all-powerful, it's all-loving, and it's living. And at that point, you can just change it to He, okay? And we realize there's a God, okay? Now, this reasoning is really solid. So how do we talk to somebody else about this? So, whoops, I didn't know I had a slide for this one. Well, now you guys get to just see it, too. All right. How do we practically talk to an unbeliever like this? Okay, so this is going to be me because, the Christian, because he has an awesome beard. And, come on, So that's how I see myself when I look in the mirror in the morning. I look like Spurgeon with my godly beard. All right, so the first thing you ask is, can we agree that something exists? And the guy says, yes. All right. And then you say, can we agree that nothing does not produce something? And he says, let me think about that. Be like, this should be easy to realize. Nothing can't do anything. What is nothing? It's no thing. It can't eat, breathe, think, move, or act. Nothing is nothing. Even David Hume conceded that it is absurd proposition to suggest that things arise without a cause. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. Well, if something exists and nothing does not produce something, then we agree that something must have always existed. My brain hurts. I'm on break, man. Something must have always existed to have brought into being the things that now exist. For as you just agreed, nothing cannot produce something. Now, there are only two options as to what that something has always existed might be, the universe or something outside the universe. Well, amazingly, today's scientists have actually proven that the universe has not always existed. The motion of the galaxies, the second law of thermodynamics, the background radiation echo, all point to the fact that the universe began to exist. If the universe has not always existed, and something must have always existed, then something or something outside the universe must have always existed. I propose to you that person is an intelligent, living, powerful being, i.e. God. All right, so you guys got that, right? So you're just going to, next time you talk to somebody that doesn't believe in God, you just bust that one out, right? And now you're like, that's super complicated. Well, it's just as simple as this. You first ask them, well, do you believe that something exists? And they say yes. And then do you believe that nothing can produce something? They're like, no, I believe that something has to produce something. And you say, okay, good, great. So then you believe that something must have always existed. And then they say, yeah. And then they're like, I feel like you're leading me into a trap at this point. And then you say, okay, yes. He says, yeah, something must have always existed. And then you say to them, okay, so which one was it? The universe or God? And they'll be like, okay, I don't want to pick God because I don't believe in God, so let's say the universe. And then you say, well, what about the second law of thermodynamics? Or what about the radiation background echo and things of that sort? And you point that out to them, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, so apparently there was something. So what other evidence do we have that God exists? Now, this one's awesome. We're going to be looking at physics at this point. Now, physics is about the fine-tuning of the universe. Now, I would love to explain to you physics, but the reality is that I'm just not that smart, and I'm just going to be honest, okay? I don't know a lot about physics, so I'm going to let other guys who know about physics talk to you right now. But basically, to sum it all up, is that God has made the universe so fine-tuned that if it was just a little bit different, it wouldn't work. Just like if we were to take this sequence right here of blocks and we were to put a yellow one on it, right? We have just ruined our sequence. Same thing with the universe. Huh? I know, we could have another sequence. You're totally right. But it would ruin the red and blue sequence. And so the same thing with the universe. Just something a little different and explosion. End of the universe. You don't get Ryan. Life is over, right? Okay, so here we go. So we're going to watch a little video. It's 6 minutes and 55 seconds exactly if you want to set your timer about physics.
Since the beginning of time, all the matter in the universe has been governed by precisely balanced laws and constants. During an interview with Robin Collins, a philosopher with degrees in mathematics and physics, Strobel learned how these laws offer compelling evidence for a creator and conspire to make the universe habitable for life.
The laws of physics are balanced on a razor's edge for life to occur. For example, if you didn't have something like gravity that pulled matter together, you would never get planets, you wouldn't get stars, you wouldn't get any complex organisms. If you didn't have the strong nuclear force, there would be nothing to hold protons and neutrons together in the nucleus. And so you wouldn't have any atoms, so no chemistry. If you didn't have the electromagnetic force, you would have no bonding between chemicals. You would have no light, and the list goes on. So you need all these sorts of fundamental principles have to be in place in order for life to occur. Wipe out one of those principles, wipe out one of those laws, no life.
Strobel learned that life also hinges on the precise strengths and relative values of many different physical constants. One example of this fine-tuning is the force of gravity.
Imagine a ruler divided up into 1-inch increments and then stretched across the entire universe, a distance of some 14 billion light years. For the purposes of illustration, the ruler represents the possible range for gravity. In other words, the setting for the strength of gravity could have been anywhere along the ruler, but it just happens to be situated in exactly the right place so that life is possible. Now, if you were to change the force of gravity by moving the setting just 1 inch compared to the entire width of the universe, the effect on life would be catastrophic.
No large-scale life forms could exist. Anything that was more than the size of a pea would be completely crushed. So you might be able to get life of a very, very primitive sort, such as bacteria, but you could never get conscious observers.
The strength of gravity is just one of at least 30 separate parameters that must be finely tuned to produce a life-sustaining universe. Another example is the cosmological constant.
The cosmological constant describes the expansion speed of space in the universe. If space expands too quickly, then the universe will spread out so quickly that material objects can't form. So you can't get stars and galaxies and planets and the types of things that we, of course, take for granted in our universe.
Physicists have determined that the cosmological constant is fine-tuned to 1 part in 100 million billion 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 billion. Such precision has been compared to traveling hundreds of miles into space, then throwing a dart at the Earth and hitting a bullseye measuring 1/trillionth of a trillionth of an inch in diameter, an area less than the width of a single atom.
Just consider those two parameters, gravity and the cosmological constant. Their level of fine-tuning is to a precision of 1 part in 100 million trillion 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 trillion. I mean, that's like 1 atom in the entire known universe.
This fine-tuning is also evident at the atomic level. The strong nuclear force binds atoms together. If the strength of this force were to decrease by 1 part in 10,000 billion 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 billion, the only element left in the universe would be hydrogen. Again, chemical life would not be possible. The fine-tuning of the laws and forces of physics is so precise that few theorists are comfortable invoking mere chance as an explanation, unless our universe is not the only roll of the dice.
If the universe looks like it's fine-tuned for complex life, maybe there's a fine-tuner. Maybe it was fine-tuned for life. And this has certain unsavory theological implications. And so it's not surprising that those committed to a fundamentally materialistic view of reality would try to find an escape hatch. And the most popular escape hatch for this theological implication of fine-tuning is this idea of multiple universes.
As its name suggests, The theory of multiple universes proposes that our universe is not alone. Instead, it is part of a vast ensemble of universes, each with a different set of laws and constants.
If there's only one universe, then the conclusion that the universe looks fine-tuned because it is fine-tuned is inescapable. But if our universe is just one of a vast set, then you seem to have more resources to play with. Chance gets a new lease on life. I sometimes try to imagine what physicists have in mind that postulate this idea of multiple universes. I mean, what would the generator look like that creates them? Maybe it's like a giant monolith that has dozens of different dials, each of which has to be set to the right physical constant.
If we think of these parameters as dials, each of the dials is different. So if you produce enough universes with enough different dial settings, eventually, just by chance, you get one just right. So you might have to produce a trillion universes. But eventually, if you have a generator that's just spitting out just an enormous number of them, then it gets the right dial setting. And then by just chance, you get conditions right for life. So it's a huge cosmic lottery. That's the idea.
It's an interesting idea. I mean, there's really only one problem with it. There's no independent evidence that it's true. Besides, it really just pushes the question back a step, because we could still ask, who built the generator?
The suggestion of multiple universes strikes me as a desperate attempt to explain away the obvious, which is that the universe is finely tuned by an intelligence to sustain complex life. An intelligence that must be beyond the constraints of time and space.
Okay, so you guys probably tracked with that one a little bit better, but here you got physics so fine-tuned to the trillionth amount. All right, he talked about the cosmological constant, all right, of the universe, and if that were to change just one part, there would be no complex life in the universe, and the chances of that happening were like the equivalent of being out in space and throwing a dart down at Earth and hitting the size of an atom just by chance, okay? And that's just one of the many laws of the universe that has to happen by chance. Okay? This is what you have to believe as an atheist, that every single constant, every single law came by chance. Okay? And it's just unbelievable to think that. So what atheists do is they say that there was something out there that was just generating all these different universes, but then the question is well, where did the generator come from at that point? Okay? So then we have astrobiology, which is the study of how unique Earth is in our solar system and in our universe.
For more than a decade, Guillermo Gonzalez has researched the characteristics of a planet required to support complex life. Estimates vary, but a current list of these factors would number at least 20 and include an oxygen-rich atmosphere, liquid water and large continental land masses, a home star of the right temperature and mass, an orbital path that is neither too far nor too close to the home star, a moon large enough to stabilize the tilt of the planet's axis and the movement of its tides, a magnetic field strong enough to deflect the sun's radiation, and a position in the relatively narrow habitable region of a spiral galaxy.
All these factors have to be met at one place and time in the galaxy if you're going to have a planet as habitable as the Earth, which you need for complex and even technological life.
Theorists have attempted to calculate the odds of all the necessary factors for life appearing at the same time on the same planet. A conservative estimate is 1 chance in 10 to the negative 15th, or 1/1000th of 1 trillionth. On those terms, even when compared to the billions of suns and possible planets in our Milky Way galaxy, the probability of even a single habitable world appears unlikely.
There are many probabilistic resources in the galaxy, but on the other side of the coin are all these factors that you need. You have to get just right in order to have just one habitable planet like the Earth. And that leads me to conclude that yes, we're rare in the galaxy.
in the galaxy, in the universe. All right? And so, do you guys track with what it's saying there? You need oceans, you need magnetic fields, you need a moon, you need it to be in a space where it's not going to run into other planets. You need all these things for life to exist. All of them exist here. When you wake up in the morning and you realize you're not burned by the sun, okay, that's amazing, okay, that you have air, oxygen to provide for you. All those things, no, they just happen by chance, right? That's what the atheists would believe, those who do not believe in God, but it just doesn't make sense. Remember what I started off saying, is that science is pointing to the direction that something supernatural exists. I'm not even going to say the God of the Bible yet, okay? We will get there. But there is a God that exists, okay? And then the last one is DNA complexity. Creation is getting so loud now at this point that people have to cover their ears to be able to not believe in a God anymore. There have been prominent atheists that are coming to Christ now, or not coming to Christ, but coming to the knowledge that there is a God based off one piece of evidence that took place within the last 100 years, which is the discovery of DNA. But there are some people that still turn a blind eye. Richard Dawkins, who is an atheist and a evangelist almost of atheism, says, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. All right? Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. Okay? The guy who discovered DNA is even saying this. They go, okay, I know it looks like it's designed, and it looks like there's God, but you just need to remind yourself there's not a God. Why? Because they're closed-minded. They're closed-minded. It's not because of the evidence, it's because they're closed-minded. Could you imagine a CSI coming on a crime scene and saying, it looks like arson, but we just can't accept it because no one can light anything on fire, right? Okay? It looks like someone lit it on fire, but that's not possible. Fire only happens on accident, okay? That'd be ridiculous. But that's what many atheists are doing today. Would anyone drive by Mount Rushmore and say, oh, that looks like someone carved faces into the side of the mountain. That looks like George Washington. But we cannot accept it because humans are just not capable of doing that, right? That'd be ridiculous. Or how many of you guys have ever been out in the desert or walking around? I've had it happen to me once in my life, and it was amazing. And you find an arrowhead, right? And you're like, oh, sweet, a couple of you guys. So you find an arrowhead. Your first thought is not, wow, look at how this rock chipped off that rock and how it has a spot to like. No, you think, wow, there must have been Indians here, right? Okay, and it's not even that much of work that's done, right? When you look at creation, you look at the world, you go, gosh, there has to be a God. But people turn a blind eye to it. All right. We're going to watch this last video, and then we're almost done.
In 1953, when Watson and Crick elucidated the structure of the DNA molecule, they discovered that DNA was a carrier of genetic information in the form of a 4-character digital code. That is to say that DNA functions like a software program, only more complex than anyone has ever created or devised. For a biological system to run and operate, it needs genetic information to build the proteins and protein machines that cause the cells to maintain their function.
This information is stored in a precise arrangement of 4 chemicals that scientists represent with the letters A, C, T, and G. Sequences of these chemicals provide the instructions necessary to assemble complex protein molecules that in turn help form structures as diverse as eyes, legs, wings, and hearts. This code has been called the language of life, and it is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information in the known universe.
Geneticist Michael Denton has estimated that the amount of biological information necessary to build all of the proteins in all of the species of organisms that have ever existed on planet Earth could be held in a single teaspoon. And we'd still have room left over for all of the information contained in every book ever written. The more I learned about DNA, the more I understood the significance of what Stephen Meyer called the most fundamental question facing biology today. Where did the information in DNA come from? How did it arise in the first place?
Well, lots of people have wanted to explain the origin of information by reference to the laws of physics and chemistry, or by reference to the chemical properties of the constituent parts of the DNA. But that would be like saying that you could explain the information in this morning's New York Times headline by reference to the physics and chemistry of ink bonding to paper. There is a chemical explanation as to why the ink sticks to the paper, but that does not explain the way the ink got arranged to convey a message that could be understood by speakers of the English language. Information requires a material medium, but it transcends the material medium.
An explanation for the origin of the genetic instructions needed to build the first life is the holy grail of 21st century biology. Theories proposing that this information arose through natural selection acting upon non-living molecules, or the self-organizing power of chemicals in a primordial soup, have repeatedly failed. Even time and blind chance, the oft-invoked saviors of implausible biological scenarios, have fallen far short as accounts for the source of the instructions in DNA. Mathematicians, for example, have calculated that a universe filled with monkeys, typing relentlessly throughout the oldest estimated age of the cosmos, would have no realistic chance of producing Shakespeare's play Hamlet, let alone a transcript of the genetic information required to build even the simplest living cell.
So you guys grasp that, right? It's the equivalent is you got information that is so complex that created you to make sure that you have the eye color you have, the skin color you have, the hair color you have. It's information that's passed down from your parents and moves through different. It's not even just humans. It's also birds and everything else. We all have DNA that makes us us. Okay, and that information is so unique, and that and it's organized. You know, if I were to take Scrabble letters and just start throwing them on the ground, right? The chances of me coming up with a 2-letter word is possible, but try like 13 letters, okay? That'd be incredible, okay? But the information, just by chance to happen, that it was within the DNA cell, is impossible. The complexity of life is amazing. Consider the heart for a moment. A muscle the size of a man's fist contracts and forces blood through 60,000 miles of veins, arteries, and capillaries in your body. Okay, so if you were to take all the capillaries, all of your veins, all of your arteries, and put them back to back, you would be 60,000 miles long. Every hour, it pumps 75 gallons of blood, totaling more than 50,000 gallons every month that goes through your heart. Okay? That's amazing. Okay? A good question to ask the atheist is this. What do you think evolved first? The heart, the blood, or the veins? Okay? What evolved first? Because the reality is all three are dependent upon each other to be able to exist. All right? So which evolved first? The eyeball, for example, is incredibly complex. It has a lens on one side, a light-sensitive retina made up of rods and cones inside the other. The lens itself has a sturdy protective covering called the cornea and sits over an iris designed to protect the eye from excessive light. The eye contains an amazing watery substance that is replaced every 4 hours. The eyeball is also with tears bringing oxygen to the cornea, carrying chemicals that kill bacteria and proteins to coat the eyes, wash the eyes, and remove debris toward a lower drain or lacrimal duct. And eyelids sweeps secretions over the cornea to keep it moist. Eyelashes protect it from dust, and extraordinary fine-tuned muscles are attached to the eye that move the eye and shape the lens for function and focus. Have you ever noticed that? Like if you put your finger right in front of your face, maybe this far away, look at your finger, okay? Notice how everything in the background becomes blurry. Now look past your finger, and now your finger's blurry. Did you know, right? You know what's amazing? Is that you see how it did that? Everything's blurry behind it, and then you focus, and then everything's clear. Isn't that amazing? You know what muscles it did? It just went like this. And it contracted your eyes. Your eyes contracted and it expanded to be able to give you focus. That just kind of stuff just doesn't happen by chance. Even Darwin conceded in his famous book, The Origin of Species, to suppose that the eye with all its imitable matchless contrivances or plans for adjusting the focus to different distance, for emitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic abbreviation could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. So even for him, he's like, when I look at the eye, it seems unbelievable for me that it all came by chance. Once again, as Charlie Campbell said, for me, it's more reasonable to believe, based on the laws of logic, as well as observable scientific evidence, that God exists, rather than to believe what most atheists believe, that nothing times nobody equals everything we see in the universe. So hopefully, after an hour and 5 minutes of sitting here, that you guys have been convinced that God exists, that there is a God. I'm going to give you more evidence why I believe it's the God of the Bible later, but it just makes most sense. So if you still have a question or you didn't agree with something, you can write it down later. Okay. All right. That's it. You can stop the recording, and we are going to go now into the fellowship hall and eat tacos and play some